Hi, I'm Sam Goldstein.
Murray Klippenstein.
Chikan Shi.
Brian Prill.
Lubomir Polyachik.
John Fagan.
Alexander Wilkes.
And I'm against the Statement of Principles.
I was born and raised in communist Czechoslovakia. In 1968, Czechoslovakia was invaded by the Warsaw Pact countries. It was called the Fraternal Assistance of the other communist countries in East Europe. I was a teenager, and my father was a government official. After the Russian invasion, all government officials were required to make a public declaration of support for the Soviet invasion. My father refused. As a result, he had to quit his membership in the Communist Party, his job, and as a matter of fact, the day after he quit those positions, we left Czechoslovakia. I left on a bus with my younger brother through one border crossing to Austria, and my father and mother left with my older brother by car on a different crossing, so that no one would pick up a phone, call Prague, and say, "Hey, did you know that Polyachik is taking his whole family to the West?"
I think the reason why I became a lawyer is I always had a very strong sense of injustice ever since I was growing up. I remember coming to the aid of some kids in my class in grade 6 in public school who were being bullied, and I just think from there it just always stayed with me.
First year of being called to the bar, I had to check a box saying, do you subscribe to the Statement of Principles? Went in, did the research of what the underlying document was that basically called our entire profession a bunch of racists, and read all the documentation behind the recommendations advanced by the Law Society, where we were going with that, and what the purpose of promoting, as they say, the equity, diversity, and inclusion was, and it did not sit well.
Some red flags went up because this seemed a little weird. And when I got to recommendation 3.1, the compulsory statement of principles, I was flabbergasted instantly. I said, these folks are going to force me to adopt a statement of principles. And I said, wait a minute, my principles are my principles. I've come to my principles over my life through a lot of thought. I care about my principles. They're my principles. And the thought of anybody else, never mind an arm of government, telling me that I have to effectively publicly adopt and abide by a statement of principles that they choose is just abhorrent to me.
Ironically, the one thing that I did experience that was somewhat similar growing up in Canada actually happened in law school. Prior to that, I've never run into anything, but in law school, one of our professors walked into the class and started the class off by telling everybody in the classroom, if you're white, you're racist. And that kind of caught my attention as I started to think to myself, so you're telling me that my 10-year-old son is a racist because of who his mom and his dad is? That doesn't make any sense to me. If anybody is a racist, it will be because of their beliefs and their thoughts and their actions, but not certainly because of their parents and their heritage. When people talk about, I fall into that group being the white male Protestant heterosexual, and some people seem to feel that that's a privileged place to be.
I understand why you think the statement of principles is a good thing and will help your objective. I respectfully say, however, you are mistaken. if you want people from traditionally excluded groups to get ahead, stop harping and carping on questions of ethnicity, so-called race, gender, sexual orientation.
If you say those words, you're a good person. If you don't, you're a bad person. Life isn't so simple. I suspect there are a lot of people who would just sign the statement of principles to get on with their lives because it's just too hard to say no to it. And I understand that. Perhaps I have the privilege to be old enough that I'm towards the end of my career. I have a lot of sympathy for the younger lawyers, especially if you have a family, that you really can think of suddenly in the middle of raising your family, living a life, pursuing your dreams, to have to pick up this big fight with the law society whom can potentially take away your license. You don't care until you have to care. People talk about the Holocaust, how it all decided, how it all started. But I will say this, I think it is our obligation as Canadians that if we value the freedom we have to defend it. Why do we not care when it's something that infringes on our freedom? I think that's a better question to ask. If people don't believe it infringes on our freedom of expression, I like to hear that argument. But if it does, then you have to sit down and ask yourself, well, why is it okay? Perhaps it is exactly this attitude that I'll just check the box that got us to this point. This is the law society run by lawyers, and yet they would consider it viable to come up with such a requirement that clearly violates our fundamental freedom.